Hello there, one and all, and thank you very much indeed for tuning into episode 475 of Love at First Scent with me, Persolaise, live on YouTube as always. But if you're watching the recording, you're very welcome as well. If you haven't already subscribed to this channel, please do consider doing so. And if you would like to find out how you can support my work, you should be able to see a link to my Ko-fi page in the video description below. If you have been watching live and you've made it to the third and final video for today, then thank you very much for sticking around. We have one comment so far from Sean who says, whoop, number 3, here we go. Okay, so a couple of reasons, 2 or 3 reasons for doing this video. The video in question, again, it's ostensibly going to be a review of this newish release from Coty, or specifically the brand that Coty have created called Infiniment Coty, and this is Noir Encens, which I think, personally, I think is the best from the range, composed by Fabrice Pellegrin. But Polpo says again, hi, you're very, very welcome. Welcome back. But this video is also actually an excuse and a means to get you to read my Substack article if you care to read it. It is behind a paywall, so I'm pre-warning you about that. Although if you haven't subscribed to the Substack, then you get you can take out a sort of free 1-week subscription, I believe. And the reason why I'm doing that is because different people come at my work in different sorts of ways. And I think sometimes it's YouTube that takes people to my Substack. Sometimes it's the blog that takes people to my Substack. And I thought, well, let me do a video which will alert people to the fact that there is an extensive review of this range over on the Substack, a longish article. Eric says, I just subscribed to your Substack for a year. That's very, very kind. I really appreciate that. Thank you very, very much. Pimp that prose, Persolaise says, yes, did you watch what I'm doing? Anyway, I'm not going to go over a lot of the things that I said in that Substack, because there were some sort of quite lengthy thoughts on the Infiniment Coty range. But very, very quickly, it's the first time for years and years and years and years that Coty have actually done some new perfumes under the Coty label, as it were. There are 14 of them, which is a high number. They haven't yet, as far as I'm aware, officially credited the perfumers, but I can fairly confidently say I think that this one was made by Fabrice Pellegrin, because the perfumer himself told me at the launch event in London. So I guess I'm allowed to say that. More on that in the Substack article. Let's have a smell, because as I say, and then I would like to kind of go on to a different, a kind of extend a discussion about perfumers and et cetera, and be very, very interested in your thoughts. There is a reason why the bottle is shaped this way and does all of this sort of thing. That's in the Substack article as well. But let's smell the perfume. Fabrice Pellegrin, I think, has become one of my favorite perfumers. I find his work really, really interesting. I love the Adorum, or I should say that I adore the Adorum that he did for Ney. Was it last year? This beautiful kind of hyper dark, really, really dangerous, lethal smelling incense perfume. I mean, really, really gorgeous. I love the L'Eau Papier that he did recently for Diptyque. I love I quite like the Eau Nabati that he did for Diptyque. And in Noir Encens, yes, there is an incense note, and a very, very well done incense note. But to me, the main thing that kind of stuck in my mind, or stays in my mind, and it was the very first thing that I thought as well when I smelled this back at the launch, is I thought, I wonder if Fabrice Pellegrin thought to himself, ooh, I quite like that discontinued underrated gem from Yves Saint Laurent from many years ago, Yves Saint Laurent Nu, as in NU, the French word for nude. And I think maybe he thought to himself, I'd quite like to have a go at making something along those lines. And to me, this is a sort of marriage or a halfway point between YSL Nu and also YSL's Opium. It's got the spiciness of Opium, it's got the mystique of Opium, it's got the darkness of Opium, and maybe as well the kind of ambery sweetness of Opium. But it also has the prominent incense note that you get from Nu. By the way, if you've never smelled YSL Nu, if you're looking for a kind of vintage-ish bottle to add to your collection, that is a good one to have. It's a beautiful, beautiful incense, but it's also got that kind of slightly crimson lipsticky feel to it, and a kind of fuzziness that I've always struggled to describe, but maybe it's something that comes across in the patchouli. I don't know, but to me, it's new has always been about a texture, which I guess is interesting. You know, for a perfume called Nude, it's somehow about clothing and being unclothed and putting clothes on and removing clothes. I mean, it's New is a beautiful piece of work. Woozy says, to be honest, from what you said in the first vid and the tone, I thought you were going to tear this to shreds, a la Viking Cologne. Read the Substack article. This is the one that I like. This is my favorite one. The others, maybe I don't like quite so much. But let's lead with the positives. Wagstaff says, Adorum was special indeed. Offhand, I didn't remember that was Pellegrin. Oh, yeah, it was Fabrice Pellegrin. I love New, says Eric. I just went to my storage and realized I have 3 bottles still. Wow, I've just got the one. Look after that. Look after that. Woozy says, be subscribed to both you and Luca Turin on Substack. That's very, very, very gratifying. Thank you so much. I do genuinely appreciate that, because it makes me sit and try and, you know, give you some semi-decent, semi-coherent prose. You know, I sit there thinking, okay, people have paid to read this stuff. Let's give them something worthwhile. Was New under Tom Ford, says Woozy. Yes, I believe it was, and that was a good era for Tom Ford. Slight downside, I guess, that for me, this one doesn't have as prominent a sillage as I would have liked, but that the whole range does play it quite safe. It doesn't last as long as quite as long as I would like it to last. But I'm sure all of that was deliberate, which is kind of what I want to talk about. But let's also go to the Coty or Infiniment Coty page and tell you what they say about this one. Incense Rising Reborn, a blank page to expunge the past, to reinvent, revel in rebirth, exalt the sum of self, like the phoenix in the image of incense burning, rising unstoppable from the ashes. I mean, this is trying very hard. Its energy harnessed in a perfume made bold and intense by black pepper and incense. Okay. Volutes of incense intertwine. I thought that was a bit ironic, because didn't Fabrice Pellegrin also do volute for Diptyque, which I think has been discontinued. Anyway, volutes of incense intertwine with fiery sparks of black pepper, the fusing ray of light elevating through the mystical penumbra. This just takes me back to the London Launch event. The olfactory family that they put this into, I didn't even know there was such an olfactory family, because apparently it's avant-garde woody. Michael Edwards, I think you need to add a new slice to your fragrance wheel. The main notes are incense and black pepper, and the fragrance oil concentration, they say, is 20%. And I wonder perversely if that is actually the thing that is keeping it quite low down. I wonder if it had been less concentrated, it might have taken flight a little bit more. But there we are. So that's what the brand says about it. Do feel free to explore the website and find out, you know, about the other perfumes. It ain't cheap. It's £195 for, how large is this bottle? This is, I can't even, it's a 75 ml bottle. So, you know, that doesn't count as cheap. Wagstaff says, it is indeed a lot of work to expunge the past, or sadly dementia maybe. But, you know, this made me think about something that actually I was discussing with a perfumer the other day, and it was an off-the-record discussion, and so I suppose I shouldn't really, you know, reveal their name, because that wouldn't be fair. But we were having a discussion about scents being attributed to perfumers. There was a huge uproar when this range was announced, because Coty didn't announce the name of the names of the perfumers. I know that they're out there on various websites, but then we're not sure how reliable those are, and we just kind of have to go with whether the websites are reliable or not. But it made me think of this thing of how, if a perfume is really great and we love it, we praise the perfumer, and also if it isn't, we criticize the perfumer. And I'm not sure how fair that is and how just that is, um, because as this particular perfumer was telling me, and it's not something I didn't know, but it was a timely reminder, and I think we would do well to remind ourselves of this every now and then. Ultimately, it's the creative powers at the brand that make the decision about the perfume, especially if it's a prominent brand. There are lots and lots of different ways in which a perfume can see the light of day. For instance, if you are not a particularly moneyed brand and you don't yet have a lot of clout, you could go to you could go to the perfume production house. You could go to the likes of Givaudan or IFF or Firmenich or whatever, and say, I would really like a perfume from you. And they could turn around and say to you, yes, okay, fine, but we're just going to give you a scent, presumably something off the shelf. And if you don't like it, tough. If you like it, you can have it, but we're not going to get into mods. We're not going to get into tweaks. We're not going to get into modifications. So then I suppose the power that the brand has is that they could take it or leave it, but they may not necessarily be able to put their own imprint on it. And so then who is to blame, as it were, if it isn't a terribly good perfume? But you get into more sort of tricky territories when it comes to attributing the perfume to the perfumer, when it's the brand that says, oh, we think the jasmine note should be more prominent. We think the musks should be more prominent, because you're then starting to get into the game where you're almost sort of treating the perfumer like a technician who is doing your bidding. I don't want to reduce perfumers to technicians, because of course they are not just technicians. And again, if you have a situation where the brand happens to have a good relationship with the perfume production company, if they happen to have a good relationship with the perfumer, if the perfumer is talented, they can interpret, usually through an evaluator, what the brand is saying. So if the brand says, we need to make the jasmine note more prominent, the perfumer goes, okay, they're saying jasmine, but I reckon actually they mean this. And with their talent and with their skills and with their expertise and their know-how, they will then create something that maybe the brand didn't even expect or know that they wanted. Wagstaff says, gets into auteur theory and film criticism. Yes, I completely thought about auteur theory in relation to all of this. Rachel says that criticism depends on the structure of the business. Big conglomerates make decisions differently from an artisanal small family business. Yes, absolutely. And that's why there are no absolutes here, are they? Attributional bias, says Tracy. They are briefed, as I understand it. Yes, they are briefed. And again, to go back to this perfumer, he said, I don't mind telling you it's a he, it doesn't really narrow it down very much. He said that the trouble is that, if you want to keep your job in the high profile perfume production house, then you need to win briefs. And if a brand comes and says to you, we want, X, Y, Z, and you think to yourself as the perfumer, I'm really, really tired and fed up of making X, Y, Z, I'm going to give them something really, really bold and different and unusual. You may be able to get away with that once, twice, or three times, but eventually your employers are going to come to you and say, we don't quite think this is working. We need to win tenders, we need to win briefs. You're not kind of doing your end of the deal. You keep coming up with this weird stuff. We think we need to bid farewell to you. Or in the UK context, here's your P45. And obviously a jobbing perfumer that needs to keep their position is not going to do that. And so they need to put themselves in the mindset of maybe not somebody who's particularly creative, but somebody who is going to meet the demands of the brief. Woozy says, what if this entire time Quentin Biche hates Akigala wood, but all the brands just ask his parent company for it every time? Well, it's possible. What if a brand has said to him, that thing you did in the other perfume, can we have more of the same? And what if maybe he thinks, that's them asking for Akigala wood again? I don't know. What's really, really interesting as well is that this particular perfumer told me that notions of what is considered to be mainstream smelling or niche smelling, avant-garde smelling, these things are not set in stone, and they keep changing all the time. For instance, at one perfume production house, they market tested, by which I mean, this is the kind of thing that happens on all mainstream perfume releases. They basically give them to a whole load of average people, and they get them to do test scores, and they say, what do you think of it? And perfume houses, as a matter of course, market test older perfumes that back in their day were huge hits. For example, I have it on reliable authority that l'Odyssée and l'Odyssée pour Homme now score very, very poorly on market tests because, I mean, the people smelling them are not told, right? They're just given these things blind. They're not told these were huge, huge, huge perfumes back in the day, massive blockbusters, and they're still selling very, very well. They read these perfumes as being strange and niche, and they don't do very well. And so, a perfumer may be thinking, oh, I'm going to do my own version of l'Odyssée or l'Odyssée pour Homme, and they would find that actually they would fail, even though they're taking their inspiration from something that was a massive hit back in the day. So where I'm going with all of this, and maybe it's something that we need to interview an industry person about, is that we need to be careful, I think, with attributing everything to a perfumer. Amouage, a brand that I know very well, is an interesting example. I know very, very well that even though the creative director, Renaud Salmon, there has a very, very close relationship with his perfumers, and he works very well with their talents, all of those perfumes coming out of Amouage are also Renaud's vision. And if the perfumes do not reflect his vision, they go back to the perfumer. And I think he will say to them, no, it's not quite doing it. I want such and such an idea. This is what I was trying to convey. This is what I was trying to capture. Can we go back and work on it again? The perfumer may be sitting there thinking, oh, but I think we've done it. But no, it has to go back to the drawing board. Rachel says that's why this information is really important to know. I guess you mean just what we've been talking about. Rachel goes on to say, businesses weren't always managed like this. Good point. With focus groups and chasing the consumer. Yes. And I think that is a very, very good point to make, Rachel. Thank you. You only have to go back as far as the 80s, I think, to see a much closer and more meaningful and more real relationship between brand creative director and perfumer. And I'm talking, for example, I'm thinking of somebody like Maurice Roget at Dior, who had the kind of singular vision and very, very clear thoughts about what Poison was meant to be, what Fahrenheit was meant to be, what Dune was meant to be. You had people like Chantal Ross at YSL, of course. You had people like Vera Struby, who worked very, very closely with Olivier Cresp and Thierry Mugler himself to give us Angel. But that's kind of those sorts of relationship, those sorts of setups are now the exception. And actually, we have to go to brands like Amouage, until not that long ago, brands like Frederic Malle, somebody named some other brands, to get that kind of single person creative vision working alongside the perfumers. Arquiste is a good example, because all Arquiste scents have so far only been made by Rodrigo Flores Roux and Jan Vanier and Calice Becker, and they all have Carlos Huber's vision stamped on them. And those are the sorts of brands that I think are doing that kind of 70s, 80s thing. But even there, it's difficult to say, oh, yes, this is entirely the work of the perfumer, it's entirely the work of the creative director. Woozy says, back when it was released, Santal 33 was seen as avant-garde and bold, but these days it's considered basic and boring. Well, I still don't consider it boring. I really like Santal 33. Sean Christopher says, a perfumer should be able to fight back on the ask, like Antoine Lee does. Says, no, that doesn't work, or will make it worse. Creative directors should listen to the perfumers. Yeah, maybe, or maybe they shouldn't. Maybe they need to stick to their own vision, and maybe they need to say, no, Antoine, this is what I would like you to do. And maybe at a certain point, I mean, I'm only going with Antoine Lee's example because you did. Maybe at a certain point, Antoine Lee will say, okay, well, then I think we need to part ways because this isn't working for me. Actually, very good example, Antoine Lee. Barbara Herrmann, Antoine Lee. Where does Barbara end and Antoine begin? You get this singular vision in the brand. You need Antoine's technical skills and experience, etc. But you also need Barbara to come along and say, this is what I want the perfume to be. Neela Vermeer and Bertrand Duchaufour, right? Jennifer says, these behind the scenes are interesting. I was wondering if a hit perfume being discontinued is also the house. Well, I think that just depends. We need to look at that on a case by case. So Siage says, I think that probably works in response to Sean when you're a huge indispensable name, but it must be a lot more difficult if you're a smaller perfumer trying to keep a good relationship with the brands. Absolutely, because eventually the brands will turn around and say, yeah, we don't want to work with them. Maurice Roussel likens a fragrance, says Sir Siage, to a baby, saying it needs two people. He says he doesn't like working on his own without a creative director, so maybe other perfumers feel the same. That's a good analogy. You know, that a perfume needs two parents. I like that one. I hadn't heard of that one before. That's a good one. Thank you. Woozy says perfumers like Antoine Lee and Christophe Laudamiel are able to buck the trend because they've built enough clout and rep. Yes, and absolutely. Somebody like Bertrand Duchaufour as well. But there aren't, you know, many perfumers like that out there. Okay, so this was an excuse to kind of go into a little bit of a digression and a discussion about these sorts of things, and also to mention the Substack. If you're not watching the recording, please feel free to join in the discussion. But those of you who, sorry, if you are watching the recording, I should say, if you're not watching the live, but thank you very much to all of you for those contributions in the live chat. All being well, I will be back tomorrow. That's Sunday, the 16th of June at 5 p.m. With some more Love at First Scent. Until then, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye now.